GearNetwork.com.
The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network.
I'm rich, I'm wealthy, I'm JC Money.
Coming to you live from the Gear Network studios in Rochester, New York. This is the JC Money Show with your host, John Cimino, aka JC Money. And now, here's John.
It is really difficult to be a New York Jets fan, and I think you all of you trolls and knuckleheads that follow me, and you know who you are, because every time the New York Jets lose, and I write I hate football, you're like clamoring for it. And of course, when the Jets win, and I write I love football, you're clamoring for it anyways. So this podcast, ladies and gentlemen, is for you. Welcome to this edition of the JC Money Show, everybody, here on the Gear Radio Network. My name is John Cimino at I Am JC Money on Threads and on Facebook, and pretty much anywhere you can find me, it's there except for X. I am not on the Twitter bots anymore, and that is incredibly by design. But thank you for joining me. Thank you for tuning in. And yes, folks, one of the things that I've aimed to do for quite a while now is put something out there, right? Something out to print in podcast form. And one of the things that everybody always loves to hear my opinion on is my beloved New York Jets. Now, if for those of you in the Trust the Podcast realm that are like, wait a minute, I know you say you're Bills Mafia's favorite Jets fan, but you cover the Bills every week with Ryan. What are you talking about? How could you actually be impacted by the New York Jets? Well, let me tell you, okay? I didn't choose the Jets. The Jets chose me. It was one of those things where growing up, it seemed to be a common denominator with me and my father. And my father and I do not have a great relationship at all. In fact, we have no relationship at all. But if there is one thing that I remember from him, and one thing that growing up that I don't know, just stuck with me, it was the New York Jets. I know he liked them back then, and I just kind of stuck with them. And I'm the type of person, for those that don't know me on a personal level, those that know me on a personal level will absolutely agree with what I'm saying here. But if you don't know me on a personal level, I am one of those folks that I'm such a nonconformist that I will not conform to the norm. And the norm here, being in Rochester, New York, is that you're a Buffalo Bills fan because you're in Bills country. And don't get me wrong, I do have a love for the Buffalo Bills. Like, I was genuinely concerned and would have been heartbroken if in 2013, 2014, when the talks were people, looking to buy the Bills to move them to Toronto or move them somewhere else. Austin, I think, Texas, I think, was another destination for that team. I was sitting here like, oh my God, like, no, please don't do that. Like, no one wants that to happen. Like, I love when the Bills, aside from 2 weeks a year, when they play the Jets, like, I love watching Buffalo Bills football. I love it when they do well, because the area is so much happier. And I always go back to when I was younger. And this is very big. It made a big enough impression. That was when I first realized how important football was to this area, but more specifically, how important the Buffalo Bills were to this area. The first time I remember, like, the Bills, like the Mafia, the Bills Mafia, like the fandom, I was in third grade, I believe. Third grade, and I was going into the cafeteria to get food. And there were Go Bill signs everywhere. And I remember people were dressed in, the cafeteria folks were dressed in their, Bills jerseys at the time. They were wearing, Jim Kelly jerseys or Thurman Thomas jerseys, Buffalo Bills shirts with the red helmet and that. And I always thought that was so cool. And I thought that everybody was genuinely like, I felt like the area was happier when the Bills were winning. And So that was cool. And I always, because of that, I always developed and obviously the local thing, especially as I got older, I started to appreciate local things a little bit more. And the Bills may not be local 585, but they're within an hour and change of distance between where the Gear Network studio is now and Highmark Stadium is now. So I have an appreciation for them, and I always have. But that said, I've always been a Jets fan. I think I was a Jets fan because of my father. And I think I kept it because it was the only good memory that I can recall having with that fucking idiot for, my whole life, right? And then as you get older, it's just kind of like at this point now, you're not a bandwagon fan. You got to kind of, I don't know who wrote the rules of fandom, but you got to kind of, at least in football, stick to your team, right? And you can't really jump ship or go anywhere. I've known people to do that, and then it's just kind of like they feel weird, and then they're like, I don't know, man. I don't know. I've been rooting for this team for so long. It's kind of hard to not, but in the same, like, I'm kind of tired of the losing and, the trolling that comes with it. That's where I'm at as a Jets fan. I could never envision myself in a color other than green and white, right? Those are my favorite. Those happen to be, just by happenstance, those are my favorite colors. Like, I don't, dislike green and white and with the black trim. Like, I love the New York Jets colors. Like, those are my favorite colors in general. But the team, there's always been a connection I've had with this team. And and for a large portion of my life, it was a hit or miss team. They were always good enough to compete. And they would go into they'd be in the playoffs every, if not every year, at least every other year. They may miss a year, but then they'd make the next two, and then they'd miss two, and then so at minimum, even though there were some frustrating seasons, there were some good seasons that, had me watching. But then 2010 happened. The last AFC championship game that the Jets were in. And from that point until now, present day, November 20th, 2023, as of press recording, there has been absolutely nothing to cheer about as a New York Jets fan. And it's getting to the point where I, as a football fan, have conditioned myself to be that football fan that, doesn't necessarily believe his team is going to win every single Sunday. Doesn't believe that any given Sunday thing. So when I hear things like, oh man, this Jets defense is killer, I'm like, yeah, but here's the thing. Here's that offensive line, right? And there's so many different ways that I could go with this one, and I really will, in depth when Brandon and I relaunch the Listen In podcast. Eventually, that's coming to fruition. Brandon, I'm calling your ass out on this podcast, my brother. Let's get doing this thing, man. But I don't typically bring the sports to the JC Money Show here, but I must, because all y'all love the wonderful thing. So I'm just going to start with just the organization in general. I don't know that I've fully lost on Robert Saleh as the head coach. I like Robert Saleh. I like his message. I like how he motivates people, and I like how he gets people to do their best. I like Joe Douglas. I like what Joe Douglas, the general manager, has done over the course of his time there, with the minor exception of bolstering the offensive line this past offseason. He had the opportunity to do that. He did not. Now, here we are, and where are we now? Week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we're heading into week 11, November 24th, Black Friday at 3 p.m. against the Miami Dolphins. The New York Jets are at a 4-6 record, which is good enough for third in the AFC East on a season where The expectations were astronomically high for this group because of the acquisition of Aaron Rodgers, Hall of Fame quarterback Aaron Rodgers, whom 4 plays in tore his Achilles, and is trying to make some superhuman comeback where it's like, I kind of want to see it, but not behind this offensive line, I'll tell you that much. I don't want to see Aaron Rodgers step foot on a New York Jets field in a New York Jets uniform with that goddamn offensive line. Let me tell you, I don't want to see that because he'll tear his other Achilles, knowing our luck. But 4 plays into the game against Buffalo in Week 1, which the Jets were favored, I believe, favored to win, and they did win. But I think that was more because Buffalo is not who we thought they were this year. And I'm saying that as someone that has covered the Bills team this entire year, week over week. You can hear Trust the Podcast with Ryan and I. So I'm not saying it as a Jets fan wearing the Homer hat. I'm saying it as a closet Bills fan that's like, yeah, this team did not really do a whole lot from last year to this year, and it shows. Although they just beat the hell out of the Jets, but not when you don't score offensive touchdowns, it's kind of hard to win anything, right? But it's been painfully frustrating to be a New York Jets fan this year. Now, we started off the season 1-0, right? Then 3 losses consecutively. Dallas, New England, Kansas City. Dallas, we got the crap kicked out of us. New England and Kansas City, to be perfectly honest with you, if Aaron Rodgers were at quarterback, the Jets would have won those games. I firmly believe that. That's not to say that in the Kansas City game that it was all the fault of Zach Wilson, because it was not. He played his best game as a pro that day. But there was, some reason to believe that this team could be, maybe they were better because they went on and they beat the Denver Broncos the following week. They beat the Philadelphia Eagles, whom were unbeaten at that time, handed them their first L. But then it was the Giants game when it really started to show what this team was and what the whole dynamic of this team was going to be. They struggled against a Giants team led by a quarterback whom, to be perfectly honest, I don't remember his name right off the top of my head, but I'll bring it up here. Tommy DeVito. Tommy DeVito is the Giants quarterback, and he lives with his parents, which actually is, I can't even hate. That's good on you, my man. But he was their quarterback. They didn't let him throw at all that game. And the Jets had to go to overtime to win it by a field goal. From there, they proceeded to not score touchdowns the next 3 games. Or maybe, no. I'm sorry. They did score a Bryce Hall touchdown in the Buffalo game, but against the Chargers, no touchdown. Against the Vegas Raiders, no touchdown. And here we are against Buffalo. And here we are at 4-6 now, wondering what the hell is going to go on. And I'll tell you exactly what's going to go on with the New York Jets. Nothing. They're starting Tim Boyle at quarterback against the Finns on Friday. Can't imagine that's going to be any better than what the option was with Zach Wilson, especially with that offensive line. So, in closing, for all of you, my listeners here, am I on the Zach Wilson train? Not really. Can I blame Zach Wilson for being who he is? No, he's actually playing, I think with a better offensive line, he'd probably do very well. Or at least well enough to maybe score a touchdown, right? But right now, with what I've seen with the Buffalo Bills, Zach Wilson was out of his element there. He's out of his element back there. And if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I'm not rushing this Achilles injury to come back at all. In fact, I'm probably retiring. I'm saying screw this. Unless the Jets actually do something to bolster that offensive line and give some kind of protection, so that way their playmaking running back, Breece Hall, can do his thing? Or, at most, so that way their quarterback, whomever is behind the line, doesn't have to run for their lives a second and a half into the snap? Jets aren't doing anything this year. And the Jets aren't going to do anything next year either if they don't do anything to address that offensive line woes. So for all of you who had wondered where I was at with the New York Jets, my position is the same as it was in the beginning, which is I expect nothing. And if these last few weeks are any indication, I'm expecting even less. So that's going to do it for this truncated episode of the JC Money Show. Hey, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate all of you tuning in, giving us a like, subscribe, share, do all that, please. Thank you. Love you. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, so long, everybody. Good night now. Flavor Flav, yeah, boy.
Yeah, boy.